They arrived in the skies above Earth with silver hulls that shimmered like liquid stars. The broadcast came through every satellite, hijacking screens and speakers with flawless synchronization. The voice was smooth, cold, and dripping with amusement. Humans of Earth, your resistance is admirable but archaic. Our scans confirm your projectile-based weapons are ineffective. Surrender will ensure survival. Opposition will be met with sterilization. This is not war. This is integration. For weeks, world governments have been watching strange signals near Jupiter. Then the ships descended, not in fire but in arrogant choreography. They called themselves the Vari, a coalition species, armored in reactor plates and powered by plasma rays. Their infantry glided instead of marched. Their energy fields rippled like translucent oceans. When they landed outside Berlin, they dismantled Earth's defense grid in under 10 minutes. Sergeant Aaron Rourke watched the footage from a dimly lit bunker somewhere in the Scottish Highlands. On screen, tanks exploded without impact. Bullets simply flattened or melted before touching alien armor. Soldiers screamed into radios that crackled out mid-sentence. And the Vari laughed. He chewed the end of an unlit cigar, jaw tight. His rifle, long, black, heavy, lay across his lap like an old friend. The room smelled of oil, metal, and dirt. Around him, the rest of the Ghost Talon unit sat in silence. No one spoke until Captain Voss turned from the monitor. "They're not gods," she said. "They just think they are." Rourke said nothing. He was thinking about the bullet. A single .50 caliber round he'd modified himself, forged with depleted uranium and an experimental heat spike core. Old-fashioned, illegal in most nations, capable of punching through tank, plating at 1,200 meters. The Vari wouldn't see it coming. They didn't even seem to understand what a bullet was. Earth had always bet on numbers, missiles, satellites, drone swarms. But snipers? That was an art. That was patience and breath and bone memory. That was human. Reports from France came in next. A Vari column advancing through Lion, untouched, gleaming. Local militias fired RPGs. The missiles curved and dropped, energy fields distorting their trajectory. A Vari commander stepped forward, made a gesture with one hand, and a building crumpled inward like paper. Another broadcast followed, smug and slow. "Cease these primitive hostilities. We will preserve your history for study. Your weapons belong in museums." Rourke's mouth twitched. He stood and walked to the equipment table, laid out his tools: torque driver, wind meter, scope calibrator, barrel cleaner. The team watched him silently. No one asked questions. They knew what he was preparing for. He wasn't the loudest in the unit. He rarely spoke above a murmur. But when Rourke picked up a rifle, the world around him held its breath. He began assembling the Seraph. That was what he called her. Custom built from over 20 years of obsession. Every part of the rifle was stripped, polished, balanced, adjusted. Its scope could track movement in thermal, electromagnetic, and light refraction ranges. But it wasn't the tech that made it deadly. It was Rourke. He could account for wind, shear, curvature, target movement, even battlefield psychology. He didn't just fire a bullet. He wrote its story before it left the chamber. Outside, the wind was howling. Scotland's hills rolled into jagged cliffs, and the rain carved lines through the mist. Perfect elevation, natural concealment. From the outcrop above the Vari forward camp, Rourke would have a clean line of sight to the command tent. He ran simulations in his head. Range, 2.3 kilometers. Wind, steady cross at 7 knots. Elevation drop, 50 meters. He'd need to compensate for shield distortion. If their armor was energy-based, it could refract, but not halt high-velocity kinetic force. He thought back to an old principle. Hard light is still light. Light doesn't stop metal. "Sergeant." Captain Voss stepped up beside him. "Are you sure this isn't suicide?" He looked at her. The rain glistened on her cheek. "No," he said. "It's art." When he reached the ridge at dawn, the alien camp was already active. Vari soldiers glided across the clearing, their bodies unnaturally smooth, armor catching the sunlight in ghostly ripples. The command tent stood in the center, like a cathedral of chrome. Rourke lay prone. He adjusted the scope slowly, with the reverence of a priest aligning scripture. The crosshairs found a target, a tall Varkari with a long mantle and an ornate helm, clearly a leader. The alien stood casually, giving orders to his subordinates, his stance bored, unconcerned, untouchable. The wind whispered through the grass. Rourke inhaled, held it. His finger rested against the trigger. He felt nothing. No fear, no anticipation, only calculation. A voice in his earpiece. His spotter, Levin. Target marked. Shield shimmer detected. You've got 2 seconds between field pulses. Copy, Rourke whispered. Pulse. Shield shimmered. Pause. He squeezed. The seraph bucked with thunderous crack. But Rourke was already watching through the scope. The bullet moved like a comet, invisible until impact. It struck just beneath the Varkari leader's chest plate. There was no explosion, no drama, just sudden collapse. The alien dropped to his knees, looking confused. A second later, his chest ruptured outward, armor split in half. He slumped dead. Rourke was already packing the rifle. Below, chaos. Alarms. Screams. The Varkari scrambled in confusion, forming protective triangles, scanning the air for drones. They didn't look up. They didn't even consider that a bullet from miles away had done this. Levin chuckled. I think you just rewrote the manual. Rourke didn't respond. He just slid the spent casing into his pocket. A memento. Far below, the alien forces began pulling back. The broadcast systems cut off. No new message came. Rourke stood slowly, his silhouette vanishing into the fog. Somewhere, in some distant war council light years away, someone would be reviewing sensor data and asking the same question. What kind of primitive weapon fires from nowhere and leaves a god dead? He smiled just a little and disappeared into the mist. Rain washed over the alien command post like a baptism of ignorance. Despite the death of one of their senior field leaders, the Varkari remained committed to their analysis. The incident had been an anomaly, a fluke, a localized energy surge, or unknown battlefield phenomenon. That was the official report. Unofficially, nervous whispers crept through their ranks like rotten steel. No one wanted to admit it, but something ancient stirred in the pit of their evolved instincts. Something they hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. Commander Xavier stood at the new outpost in northern Spain, his armored fingers drumming against a glowing console. The Varkari around him monitored skies and terrain with heightened sensitivity. They had doubled their shield frequencies, installed kinetic dampeners, and implemented angular deflection plating. In his language, none of these terms had ever needed to exist before. There had been no war in the galaxy that warranted such measures, not since the extinction of the Terra Marauders over 1,000 years ago. But this was different. This wasn't a war machine or a radiation pulse. This had been a single, silent, invisible attack that left no signature, no energy trail, no sound beyond the alien leader's final breath. Statistical anomaly, his adjutant murmured behind him. We should proceed with occupation. Xavier turned his gleaming faceplate toward the open sky, where birds wheeled on the wind, indifferent of Varkari presence. Anomalies kill empires when left unchecked. Elsewhere, high above that same sky, Aaron Rourke lay flat against the earth on a jagged cliffside in the Pyrenees, cloak drawn over him like moss. He hadn't moved for hours. He barely blinked. In his world, motion was noise and noise was death. Beside him, Levin peered through a tablet tethered to a pair of long-range optics. His voice barely rose above the wind. New layout, same arrogance. They've got a command module just behind the waterfall. I've marked the commander. Xavier, top tier. Intel confirms it. If we hit him, it goes up the ladder fast. Rourke didn't answer. He was measuring more than targets. He was measuring rhythms. Water, wind, distance, drift. The pulse of the alien shield was subtle, barely noticeable, but he saw it. Just like before, like a blink in a poker game. The seraph rested in the hollow of a rock. She was freshly oiled, bore no scratches, and hummed faintly with quiet potential. He adjusted the scope until it lined up perfectly between the waterfall's glimmer and the faint silhouette of the Varkari leader. You realize, Levin murmured, if you pull this off again, they're going to lose it. Panic level. Total procedural collapse. I'm counting on it, Rourke said. He let his breath fall into rhythm with the wind. The air smelled of wet stone and pine. The weight of the rifle was not a burden. It was a promise. Through the scope, the alien commander moved slightly, shifting weight from one leg to the other. A pause. Shield pulse. The trigger was soft. The recoil was familiar. The sound was thunder hidden in silk. And then Zavir's head shattered inward, folding like glass under pressure. Rourke watched as the body jerked sideways, falling over the railing. In the command post below, confusion erupted immediately. Alien personnel screamed into comms, energy weapons flaring in random directions. Their sensors reported nothing. No projectile, no drone, just sudden biological failure. But the shot was clean. It had pierced not just the armor, not just the skull, but their illusion of invulnerability. Levin exhaled slowly. That wasn't just a kill. That was a message. Rourke began disassembling the rifle, his hands precise. "We're not primitives," he said. "We're patient." Within minutes, encrypted channels across Earth resistance networks lit up. Footage from distant observers leaked online. Grainy images of the alien commander collapsing without reason. Resistance groups in Poland, India, and Argentina began new ambushes. The myth had become momentum. The Vari scrambled to create a counter-strategy. They deployed sensor drones. They launched low-orbit scan sweeps. They even retrofitted their personal armor with wide-spectrum adaptive plating, codenamed Nullcloak, meant to disperse kinetic impacts across a broader surface. But nothing answered the question they were too proud to ask aloud. What happens when technology meets mastery? At a Vari research station orbiting Mars, a panel of alien analysts replayed the footage again and again, slowing it to microscopic frames. No trace of energy. No thermal spike. No pulse. They were left with a word they hadn't used in eons. Ballistic. One researcher, her crest pale with tension, whispered, "But no one uses projectiles anymore. It's obsolete." Another corrected her. "No, it's undetectable." Back on Earth, Rourke and Levin made their way down the ridge, cloaked and silent. No drone spotted them. No sensors pinged. They vanished like smoke into the trees. That night, the sky above Europe remained quiet. No Valkyrie messages. No announcements. Just silence. And in that silence, Earth realized something. The war wasn't over. But now, the Valkyrie were thinking. They were hesitating. The next phase of resistance wouldn't be numbers or firepower. It would be stillness, shadows, and every sniper who had ever been told their skills were outdated suddenly had a war of their own to fight. As Rourke leaned against a cold pine tree to rest, he held the spent casing between thumb and forefinger. A small thing, brass and steel, but it had changed everything. And he knew there would be more shots, more commanders, more illusions to shatter. And maybe one day, they'd finally understand. Primitive wasn't an insult. It was a warning. The Vari High Assembly convened in orbit above Venus, their flagship humming with crystalline energy. What had begun as a simple annexation had turned into a festering enigma. 3 high-ranking commanders dead. 0 visible attackers. 0 recoverable projectiles. No traces beyond exit wounds and battlefield panic. To most species in the coalition, such patterns suggested sabotage, perhaps mutiny. But the Vari were not prone to internal fractures. They knew the truth, even if they refused to name it aloud. Someone on Earth was hunting them. Assembly Leader Carell's eyes, 2 pools of bioluminescent green, swept across the circular chamber. We underestimated them. Their strength is not in scale or science. It's in singularity. They do not swarm. They aim, and they wait. A murmur rolled through the room. Vari did not speak of fear easily. A strategist leaned forward, blue runes pulsing on his skin. If one is capable of such precision, there may be others. We must adapt. Adaptation implies a level field. Carell said coldly. This field was ours. Now we find ourselves vulnerable. Earth's resistance had become something else entirely. Not rebels. Not survivors. Ghosts with rifles. And the worst part, they weren't even trying to win conventionally. They were dismantling the myth of Vari superiority one trigger, pull at a time. Back in the Carpathian Mountains, Sergeant Aaron Rourke stood beneath a canopy of pines, watching frost melt from the needles as the first light of dawn crept over the peaks. He had changed positions every 2 days, never sleeping in the same hollow twice, never staying too long in one sight line. The resistance had scattered, but not in retreat. They moved like ink on blotting paper, sinking into the terrain. He'd gone weeks without a proper bath. His beard had grown out. His hands, though calloused, still moved with surgeon's delicacy as he cleaned the seraph once again. She never left his side. Where he went, she followed, and with her came the fear. "Transmission just came in," Levin said, approaching with a quiet tread. "You're famous." Vari chatter's buzzing. "They've coined a phrase for you, the hollow shot." Rourke snorted. "Dramatic. It's catching on. Makes you sound like a curse." "Maybe I am," Rourke said, then took the casing from his pocket and dropped it into a small pouch. It clinked softly against the others. 7 now. Each one a kill, each one a message. Levin handed him a hand-drawn map. "There's chatter about a new alien general arriving in Istanbul. Not Vari-born. Some kind of crossbred tactician, bred for adaptive learning, supposedly immune to repetition. Codename Life. An answer to me. Looks like it." Rourke's face darkened slightly, but not with fear, with focus. "Then let's teach him something." The Istanbul perimeter was a fortress of tech and ritual. Vari towers rose like silver bones over the Bosphorus, bristling with signal jammers, plasma turrets, and sensor drones that scanned air, ground, and thermal gradients in continuous sweeps. Life had not underestimated Earth's newest myth. He had studied it, anticipated it, expected it. But anticipation meant nothing if you couldn't see the shot coming. Rourke's new position was on a ruined bell tower deep in the outskirts, its stones weathered by time and artillery. He moved like mist, taking position in a nest of rubble wrapped in heat-dampening fabric and natural moss. He lay still for hours, watching, measuring, not just target movement, but behavior. Life was different. He didn't linger. He paced. Unpredictable. Smart. "He's baiting," Levin whispered over comms. "Doesn't stay still longer than a few seconds. He knows you're here." Rourke adjusted his scope. The pulse of the seraph matched his heartbeat. Let him know. Life moved again, walking into a courtyard surrounded by reflective shielding. His armor was matte, non-reflective. His guards, positioned asymmetrically. Smart again. But smart could still bleed. Rourke didn't aim for the center mass. He didn't aim for the head. He watched the timing, the body language, the rhythm. And then Life reached up to adjust the communicator. Just a slight turn of the head. Pulse. Shield flickered. Trigger squeezed. The bullet screamed silently across the city, through an alleyway, ricocheted off a metal statue's leg, and curved just enough to strike Life's left shoulder at the exact seam of his armor. He spun. Not dead. Not yet. Rourke had already chambered the second round. This one didn't miss. Life crumpled. The guard scrambled. But the tower was already empty. Only dust remained. The resistance broadcast the footage across dozens of encrypted channels. A subtitle followed it, short and direct. "Even evolution bleeds." That night, something shifted. For the first time since their arrival, the Vari pulled back from a major city. And in every corner of the world, snipers emerged from shadow, older men and women who had once been retired, rejected, or forgotten. Now they trained the young. Now they mattered. Rourke watched from a mountainside as Istanbul went dark beneath alien retreat. He said nothing. Just cleaned the seraph, wiped the scope, and moved on. The myth was no longer as alone. It was spreading. The wind howled across the Scottish Highlands, raw and wild, biting into stone and skin alike. Snow drifted lazily over the desolate hills, muffling all sound, blanketing the world in cold silence. High on a jagged cliff face, Aaron Rourke lay prone beneath a camouflage tarp stitched with moss and thermal thread. His breath fogged faintly against the inside of his mask. The seraph rested in his arms like an extension of his own body, perfectly aligned, perfectly still. He had not moved in 14 hours. Across the glen, embedded within a fortified alien bastion carved into the side of a mountain, the last of the Valkyrie Earth Command remained. After Istanbul, after life, after the disintegration of their eastern front, the invaders had abandoned any pretense of conquest. Now they fortified, hid, waited for reinforcements that were not coming. Earth's atmosphere had been seeded with static interference. The stars no longer answered. Inside the Valkyrie mountain base, fear had replaced arrogance. The command staff moved like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones, watching corners. General Vake, the last remaining high strategist of the Earth operation, paced before a glowing tactical table. His breathing was tight, armored fingers tapping his forearm in short bursts. His eyes, once gleaming with disdain for humanity, now flickered with calculation and fatigue. "We can't locate him," one of the officers said, staring at a grid of scanner data. "There's no trajectory, no pattern. Every strike comes from a different biome, angle, elevation. Because it isn't one shooter anymore," Vake growled. "It's dozens, maybe hundreds, and they all learn from a first. Then perhaps it's time to negotiate. We do not negotiate with primitives." But the word, once wielded like a whip, no longer stung the same way. Every time they said it, they remembered the kills, the silence, the invisible shots, the ghosts in the hills. Every time they said primitive, they bled. Back on the ridge, Rourke adjusted his scope by 0.5 millimeter. The Seraph's calibration was flawless. He had modified her again. Smaller chamber, lighter trigger, and an ultra-dense alloy round designed for angular penetration. Vake wore the new armor, Null Cloak MK4, supposedly impenetrable to kinetic impact. He'd test that claim personally. From the comm unit in his ear, Levin's voice crackled gently. "Our contact in the Alps confirms. This is the last Earthside command structure. Once he's down, they've got no centralized ops left." Rourke remained still. His trigger finger flexed once, then stilled. He didn't need to reply. Levin knew. Everyone did. The end had a rhythm, and Rourke had mastered its tempo. Inside the mountain, Vake stopped mid-stride. His instincts twitched. The alien had once been bred for siege warfare. He had crushed rebellions on 6 moons. He had decimated civilizations with orbital bombardments. And now, he was afraid of a bullet. He could not see. He turned toward the command table. For a split second, the collar of his armor lifted just slightly. An adjustment. A twitch. That was a shot. Rourke didn't blink. Didn't exhale. The Seraph bucked gently, whispering her final song. The bullet streaked through the storm, through snow, wind, and the tiniest gap between the fence plates. It struck the base of Vake's neck just beneath the skull. He dropped instantly, his body collapsing over the table, lights flickering around him. Chaos erupted. Sirens, shouts, weapon fire into empty walls. But there was nothing to shoot at. Outside, Rourke stood slowly, bones creaking. He packed the Seraph away with reverence and slung her across his back. He didn't look back at the base. He didn't need to. The war had ended the moment Vake's body hit the floor. By nightfall, across every continent, alien forces deactivated perimeter fields. Ships lifted off not to attack, but to flee. Not in formation, scattered. Earth's resistance watched in awe as their enemies abandoned the planet, like rats fleeing a burning ship. But there had been no fire. Only cold, quiet precision. Rourke returned weeks later to the cabin in Alaska, an old hunter's lodge long forgotten by maps. Levin waited by the stove, the smell of coffee thick in the air. "You ever think about stopping?" Levin asked, handing him a tin mug. "I did," Rourke said, taking a sip. "Then I thought about the next war. You think they'll come back?" "Not these ones. But someone will." He paused and added, "They always do." Levin nodded. "You're a relic, Rourke." "Maybe." A small smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. But even relics cast long shadows. Outside, wind stirred the trees. In the distance, the aurora pulsed softly, like the breath of a planet learning to dream again. And somewhere in 6 bunkers, young recruits trained under the watchful eyes of elder snipers, no longer forgotten, no longer obsolete. They had seen what precision could do, what patience meant, what it took to shatter a myth. The war had ended, but the legend was just beginning.